A little bit of history on the relationship between Aristotle and Plato is essential at this point. Plato begins with is the student of Socrates, the father of philosophy, and Aristotle is a student of Plato. Plato begins what is known as the Academy, first European university in which various types of knowledge are studied. And Aristotle enters that school and becomes a student. Aristotle is very knowledgeable about Plato's theory. So this and Aristotle believe in the forms as presented by Socrates and further developed by Plato. So Aristotle is a believer in the forms. So Aristotle goes in as a student when he's 17 and he remains there until Plato dies. He goes as a student and he then becomes professor in Plato's school. So it's very much well versed in the theory. That's not an aside. He belonged to the same school. He belonged to the same school, the Socratic school, right? So they see the reality through the forms. But Aristotle has a problem with the separation of two worlds. He doesn't see that the abstract entities are in a separate world. What Aristotle does is bring scholarship into philosophy. He begins to do his work by researching what other philosophers had said. Okay, so he goes back and studies Thales and Anaximander, and he talks about these people in his writing. And so we get a source of historical documentation, and we also more understand his mindset, right? Because he embraced the form, these abstract entities, but he thinks different about them. His first criticism of Plato is the idea that, oops, we're playing musical chairs here, all right? So his first critique of Plato is about the forms and the sensible objects. For Plato, the forms are eternal and unchanging, and there's the sensible object. But the forms exist. Let's look at this interpretation. If the forms exist in another realm, how do they connect with the physical things here? How do they connect? Right? The example I like to use is let's say your cell phone. Your cell phone was manufactured, and there's a blueprint that was used to make your cell phone. That's the form. The blueprint is the form, and the cell phone is a sensible object. Now, how does the blueprint of the phone relate or connect with the actual phone? Through the human being. The human being who on the blueprint takes it and sends it to the manufacturing division, say, making a 10,000 cell phones, 10,000 of this model of the cell phone, okay? And so they use it as a guideline to produce the phones. That's how it's connected. But when you look at that nature and you're seeing a horse out there and you say, okay, there's a physical horse, and I believe in an ideal form of the horse, how does it come to connect? This is not explained. It's not that there's no connection. There must be some connection, but it's not explained. And this gives the philosopher reason to find a better explanation of the relation between these two. Another problem when you cause a separation of two worlds is this. The forms are eternal and unchanging, and on this level, so things change. If the forms exist out there, they're still out there. How do you account for what is out there? Is it a baby? Is it an adult? When we talk about living things like a child or a horse, or a lion, what's out there? The baby cub lion is out there is as the form. What exists out there? If it exists, what is it? If you look at raw existence, you have a big problem, okay? Because what exists out there. Now, if you look at logical possibilities, it's less problematic. I don't think it's problematic at all, right? If you say logical possibility, it's not problematic, right? But in any case, you have to explain change in this world. And Aristotle, whose father was a doctor, okay, was a very practical individual. He is the beginner. He is the founder of the science of biology. All right. And so therefore he wanted an explanation for change because it was an important part of his actual individual work, understanding nature and how it actually works. All right. So therefore he sought to find a better understanding of the relation between the forms and sensible object. And for him, he collapsed them. Okay. He collapsed them. And in a sense, he's not proving Plato wrong, but he found weakness in Plato's theory And that opens the door for him to give a better explanation of how the forms relate to sensible object. To do this, Aristotle goes back and studied the idea of substance, the fundamental material, going to the work of the ancient philosopher Thales, the first philosopher, and seeing what they were doing. All right. And then from trying to clearly define substance, he came up with his understanding. Okay. The word substance is used mostly to mean that which underlies all the properties of a thing. Like if I see a dog and I see a horse, I could say the substance, in modern day talk, the substance of these creatures are atoms and be like an atomist. Or I could be Pythagorean and say the substance, fundamental substance, are numbers. Okay, just apply the theories right now because you need to be aware of them and be able to compare and contrast them. That's the ordinary way we use the word substance when we look at fundamental stuff. But then he realized that using the word substance as reality, the horse and the dog are two different types of things, and they're equally real. They're equally real. It's not just the stuff they're made of, the matter. Aristotle going to call it in a little bit here. But the horse is a real part of nature. The dog is a real part of nature. That is also a substance. So there is a sense here in which he's postulating that the forms Plato talked about really exist, but not out there, but right here in front of you. It's an abstract component of the existence, you could say. In that sense, you could say the form is a property of existence. And that would be true too. That's another abstract way. But do they really exist? And it seems as if he's toying with this. They seem to exist for him as well. All right. That which stands alone. And what does that mean? When you look at natural kinds, okay, you're looking at the horse, you're looking at the dog, you're looking at the eagle flying in the air, they're produced by nature. So whatever the fundamental material is, okay, it is what it is. But the particular eagle, the shape of the eagle is also part of reality. So he want to say, I want to call substance, real things, substances. All right. I want to call real things substances, not just what's underneath it all, but the whole thing is real. So he described a substance as a combination of form and matter. That means when you're looking at the eagle, the form is what the matter is the building block, whatever that material is. If it's atoms, it's atoms. If it's numbers, like Pythagoras said, then it's numbers. Aristotle's not going to fight whatever it is, whatever it is. All I know is I have an eagle in front of me, okay? But the eagle, the matter gives rise to the horse, the dog, and also the eagle. So what is that? That's the form. The material, the matter is arranged in a particular way, which we call a horse. Another way we call an eagle. Another way we call a dog. Okay, so forms are a necessary part of reality. At this level, I agree with Aristotle if you see it as a property of matter. It's a property of matter. In that sense, I'm an abstractionist. I understand this, and it works out very well. But if you think the forms exist, then you have a problem that Plato had. Because if they exist, how does the existing thing transform the matter or take on the matter to become itself? You know what I mean? You still have to explain more. And amongst living things, you can actually give some kind of explanation. You can bring in a doctrine of the soul or something like that. But when you're looking at a planet or non-living crystals and things like that, you can't, it's hard to use the theory of forms to explain those. I mean, if you assume those things exist. This is how Aristotle put it all together, all right? We say Aristotle has a theory of essences because he places these essences inside of things, all right? And it looks like if you interpret them as existing, it's easier for you to understand it. Just like Pythagoras numbers exist, assume these essences exist as well, all right? In my struggle with it, I reject this approach, all right? But let's go forward a little bit more. Let's go back to the natural kinds of Plato. Now these things are substances. One thing a lot of people like about Aristotle is that he sees a mango tree and it's a real mango tree, okay? He doesn't play around too much. Physical reality is physical reality, all right? But they don't understand Aristotle is one of the deepest thinkers we have on the level of Plato and Socrates. He's a super genius. So he recognizes your sense experience, but he's saying when you make a claim of something, you're doing something much more than that. First of all, if you say it's a real tiger, you're saying that the material, the building block of which is made, produces a flesh and blood animal. If you're seeing a tiger and the tiger is made of cotton, you have a real stuffed tiger. He looks at reality on all levels. Aristotle is very clear about that. So when I say it's real, real in what domain? Is it a real stuffed tiger or is it a real actual blood, flesh and blood tiger? He recognized that. When I say real, the matter of which it is composed of matters, okay? In addition to that, okay, I'm using imagery here that most of you should be familiar with through television and classes in high school and things like that, tigers and leopards and lions. You should be familiar with those. But if you are uneducated bloke and you're looking at something that's unique, you maybe like the different type of lizards, you're not familiar with what lizards look like, okay? Aristotle is saying, for you to say it's a real tiger, you're seeing the abstract form of the tiger. Otherwise, you can't tell it's a tiger, okay? You're seeing its essence. What's a good example? Aristotle's theory, okay, is the precursor to what you call the DNA. Attempt to come with the theory of the DNA is an attempt to explain what Aristotle is seeing here. The tiger is different from the leopard, and we do genetics profile of the creature. We're going to find differences, and this is what Aristotle is talking about. The genetic profile, okay, carries the code, the information that makes the tiger. That's the same thing as saying it has an essence. Okay, that's a good way to look at it. Okay, so but if you are not familiar, well, remember in the biology when we first began classifying these things, biologists, zoologists could not classify. They took time to classify these things. They studied, they did the abstraction that Plato requires, and boom, they come to classifying them. All right. So when you're looking at the tiger and it says real, you're doing something bizarre. You're doing something very complicated. You're recognizing the form, you're recognizing the matter. You recognize the form and recognize the matter and come drawing the conclusion. You know, at a distance, I see a horse. As I get closer, or I confirm it's a statue. So the matter is a statue, but the form is that of a horse. Another place I see with like a dog. I get close, is a statue of a dog. The essence, okay, the form is still matter, but the essence, okay, is that of a dog. Somebody took the design of a dog and put it in that statue there. Right? You see that you could see how the theory is working, right? In addition to that, Aristotle adds something Plato does not add. Okay. First of all, two things here. Each individual things, you, me, we all have our own essences, just like we say genetically. But Aristotle seeing these things as abstract entities. So maybe in living things, we all have something that exists. He does write this: when a tiger dies, the form separates from the matter, okay, and then recirculate and connects with other matter to produce a new tiger in the future. So he does speak as if the form, the essence exists, just like in Plato, okay? But then he adds something Plato doesn't have. He adds a cosmological force. How do things change? How do things change? Plato does not explain that at all. Plato is just looking at the forms and seeing that the forms are very important for things existing, which is good. We need that. Aristotle goes further and say, hey, how do things change over time? If you look at everything in the world, he gives an argument for motion, which is very, very powerful and which I agree with, okay? Is if you look at everything in the world, okay, you see some things are in motion, some things at rest. Imagine that one time everything was at rest, and the absolute level, everything was nothing was moving. Well, if that was the case, if that ever come to be, there'll be nothing moving right now. There's always other things that are motion, putting other things in motion. All right. Now this thing that's putting other things in motion, it cannot move itself, because if it was ever completely still, it can never start. Okay, because there's no force, no power. All right. So we must admit, in reality, there's an unmoved mover. There's always something there, a perpetual, that nature has a perpetual movement to it. Okay. This is the unmoved mover. He said it is this force, this cosmological force that churns things and makes things happen in the world that we experience. It causes the form to connect with matter and deconnect with matter, and then we have life occurring. All right. This idea of the purest essence, he said this thing is separate from matter. okay? It's separate from the matter. It's a form, but it's separate from the other forms because it's a force that makes things move, right? This was very influential to early Europeans. In fact, it was so powerful on the Catholic mind, okay, that the church, when they read Aristotle and studied Aristotle, they adopted Aristotle for over 1,200 years as one of their patrons. Any scientist go against Aristotle, like Galileo Galilei, attacks or disagree with Aristotle's theory, not this theory here, but another part of Aristotle's theory, he was put under house arrest. For a while, the church, the Catholic Church, defended Aristotle as their man because they saw his purest essence fits well as God's almighty power. Although this is not a God force, it's a natural force that's there. They put their God in there, and boom, Aristotle was one of theirs for a long, long time. After that 1,200-year period, they realized he's still a heretic, and they banned Aristotle, okay? I want to say, but by that time, it was too late. The influence of Aristotle's argument is permeated to Catholic philosophy and their understanding of the world. Right? It's too late. You can't get rid of philosophy just because you banned the philosopher, because you already internalized it. Very influential theory, very influential theory. Right? I guess I could ask a question. Your genetic information, does it exist? Does it exist? So you can feel the drama that I'm going through as I try to explain it as clearly as I can. I'm of the belief that it's an abstract entity, okay? An abstract, the form is an abstract possibility of matter itself. But if you think of it as existing, what does that mean? If you're genetic, you believe in genes. I hope you listen to this video, your modern time. I hope you believe that you have genetic material. Does that stuff exist? Well, genes are real, but does it exist as a stuff independent of, the chromosome that's attached to? Independent of the arrangement, does this have an independent existence? Is there an abstract component to it? It's information. The chromosomes exist. You can tear them up. You can study them, stuff like that. But it's information. It's just like coding. Does the code exist independent that which is codes, which is the chromosome? That's a question that you could try to answer. You find out you get in the same dilemma that I'm in right now, right? I have my interpretation that makes sense of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates on their view of the forms. This last slide is only meant to re-emphasize the idea that Aristotle is a pluralist. Okay, even though he understands life and death and things of that nature, he believes that these forms and everything, there's an infinite birth is going to take place. Okay, so doesn't believe there's a limitation on that in that side at all. Okay, so Aristotle, theory of essences, very contemporary, very strong. We are now complete with our reflection on the pluralists. I do recommend that you explore these philosophers through the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy to look a little bit about their lives and go a little deeper in their theories. Any of these theories appear in front of you, well, you could spend an entire semester in college studying Plato. You can get a PhD in studying Plato. You can get a PhD in studying Aristotle. Okay, so there's volumes and volumes of work on these philosophers.